In this video, we are going to talk about certification of wireless modules and boards. And we are going to talk about this topic because today almost every board is some kind of wireless, at least Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. So we would like to know what kind of certification we need, or if we need a certification. Is this what we are going to talk about, Clement?
Oh yeah, we're looking at modules in wireless and what they actually mean for your product. And we're looking at common pitfalls and misconceptions. So you have a better chance of getting your product to the market with a module or without one.
Uh,
Depends.
Perfect. I think just very briefly, I would like to mention uh, we will have some kind of slides where we talk generally about this topic, and then you have also some examples and some demos, some measurements like this one, for example, and we will also talk about these. Especially, I think two of them, what we are going to mention are, for example, ESP32 and these Raspberry Pi modules, correct?
Exactly. We are looking at very popular modules, things that people already know from out in the field, and we're gonna demystify everything about them.
So why we would like to talk about this topic from your point of view? Why it is important?
So there's one thing that you should first know about my approach to this is I'm running a little compliance company specifically focused on open source hardware and makers and so forth. And the one thing that constantly gets brought up is people mix up the legal requirements in the USA, in the EU, the different frameworks, FCC versus CE, and there's a lot of misinformation out there that is usually a mix-up of different systems, or somebody had a little misunderstanding, or things that would apply to one specific case, but not generally. And with AI, it's getting worse and worse because what the AI scrapes is basically all the stuff that's already out there that's maybe even outdated, and then it mixes it up again and spews it back. So you're not getting any better information out there. And I want to rectify that.
So you mean when someone asks AI for advice in this topic, then they may not get like correct answer.
Yeah, this is one of the fields where, especially, like, it's hard to get a really perfect answer from an AI model. But in these cases, the answers that an expert would give you is already so complicated, and it depends on the very specifics of your particular product. So you can't give a general explanation. It's basically always it depends on your exact setup, and tiny details can make a lot of difference. And the AI model doesn't understand that, obviously. So you need to be very aware of what is out there and should not rely on that information. At
Mhm.
least really, really check it.
Okay, so basically why we need to talk about this topic, because if someone design a board with wireless communication, then this board always need to have some kind of certification. But there is a little bit difference between using modules or basically placing the RF chip and antenna directly on your board. And these certifications, as you mentioned, they are different around the world. They are different in European Union, they are different in US. So I think we should start with this.
Oh, yeah.
So what is difference between US and Europe?
Well, there is a lot of difference. I think we should start at the very start. So we're talking
Okay.
about free certified modules for Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Bluetooth Low Energy. It also applies to some other wireless modules, this general concept, but we first have to clarify a few things. And we have to go through that step by step because some terms that you will hear in this conversation may be used in different ways depending on the legal framework
Hmm.
or your location. So the word module means something different in America and in the EU, for example. So we have to
Okay.
clarify all these things first so we know what we're actually talking about. This is where the mix-ups come in.
Okay.
So first we're gonna define what even is a pre-certified module, so we're all on the same page. Then we look at the general differences between the systems, FCC and CE, USA versus EU. Then we talk about when it does actually make sense to use a module. There are cases where you really, really want to have one, and there are cases where you can decide that really based on your application. Or you have to basically decide against the module because of your application. Then we're looking a bit broader into the field of compliance because it's not about RED, the Radio Equipment Directive, and EMC, electromagnetic compatibility. There's more to this. These are only parts of the whole picture, and if you're not getting the whole picture, you're missing something. That's really important. These are the tiny details that matter. And then we're looking at some real-world examples that you might encounter in your daily life and figure out, do they need a module? What are the pitfalls? What do you have to look out for? And then I'm gonna show you briefly how to figure that out for your product, because it always depends on your exact product.
Okay.
So there's no easy general answer to a very complicated question, but you can give a very complicated answer to an easy sounding question. That's where the mishaps usually happen. So this is what we usually see as a pre-certified module. This is the Raspberry Pi one, Radio Module 2 that just came out. This is an ESP32S3. You can get them ready to be soldered to your board. I have a strip of ESPs right here. So for your assembly needs, this is basically as a component. The same way a pick and place places a resistor, it also can place these modules. So for you in your design, you treat this basically like an individual component. There are also things that you would call a module. For example, this is a very old project of mine where we have like an Arduino compatible board and we have a little sensor board. These look like they are individual PCBs, like this thing here. It's just a PCB that you can solder onto another PCB. You would call this a module in general, but these are not modules like the ones we have on screen.
Because of the missing marking, or I don't know.
Well, so here's another module. This one has a shielded can, just like the one on screen. And this is a microprocessor. So this is a system-on module. It's called modules, so it must be a module. Well, that's just something that processes stuff. You would call it a module, but that is not what the FCC calls a module.
Okay.
The FCC calls a module something in a very, very specific case, and that means this thing is its own product, so to speak. It has been examined, it has been tested, it has been authorized by the FCC, and now it has something on here, an FCC ID number.
You can use cursor.
I'm on the screen. Do you see my mouse? No.
No.
Oh, okay. Maybe you can, maybe this way.
Yeah, I can see it now. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So these numbers here, try to clear that away again. So here there are numbers. This is the FCC ID number. A device only gets this number if it has been tested and approved. So this is
important to watch for when people are selecting wireless modules for their boards.
Yeah. So if most people come to this topic because they heard, oh, if I use a pre-certified module, I don't have to take care about wireless certification anymore. Something along these lines.
Yes.
Which is, we have to qualify that very much. Yeah. But this is why people in the first place go towards modules. We say, oh, if I use this, I will have an easier time, which is true. But we're gonna explain why. If a module is out there and doesn't have any numbers on here, let's look at the same module, but this is on the, just clear away the drawings. But this is from the data, not from the data sheet, this is the EU declaration of conformity for that same module, and here's nothing on there. Why? Because that photo was taken before it has acquired these certifications. There cannot be no markings before you did it. Usually you would now replace that image with one that is actually marked. But you have to go through the process first before you can actually mark it. It's a legal thing. But it's the same module. If you don't find anything on there that has an FCC ID on there, you can't call it a module under these regulations. You need to know that number, and it has to be on there. So it's actually okay to use it that way.
So this is only for FCC. FCC is in US, correct?
Yeah,
Is it
exactly.
same for like CE? Is there also a number for?
No. Here comes the thing. So the internet is a very USA-centric place in a lot of things. You find a ton of content out there, especially in electronics engineering, in English, and the USA is just a huge market. And so even in the communication that people put out there, here's the sales pitch that you usually get. Like recently, 30th of June, Evan Upton writes, Raspberry Pi radio module. Under the chicane, you can build your own wireless enabled product around ours without having to recertify the radio, saving tens of thousands of dollars. Here's one by Nordic. Same thing, pre-approved modules. We've saved you the time, blah, blah, blah. This is a very America-centric perspective. This modules approach with pre-certified modules can only be done with two big qualifiers. One, it's under FCC, which means in the USA, nowhere else. And you are not allowed to change anything about the module. So the people that built these modules, usually they have a big integration guide with them, and that says specifically how you have to mount them, how you have to solder them, the way the antenna has to be exposed, very specific sets. If you change any of these parameters, usually they have like, we have two different kinds of firmware. If you flash this and that one, both are have the FCC ID, blah, blah, blah. But if you go beyond that, your pre-certification is void. So let's look at the very simple case of an ESP32. You would have your project, you put it on here, and people often use an ESP32 not just as a Wi-Fi module that is a co-processor basically to your main processor, but they use it as the microcontroller itself.
Yeah.
So now what are you're flashing custom code on there. You've changed the product. You could potentially change its behavior in electromagnetic compatibility, in radio compatibility. There is a potential for it not performing the exact same way as it has been tested. And now, yeah, where's your module now?
So I always thought it's a if you use the part, the Wi-Fi or a wireless part, or of the module, same as it was used during certification, that it will be okay. So it's not true.
There's the thing. Can you prove that?
No.
If you can use it that way. How would you prove that?
So what does it mean? ESP32 is tricky to use?
That's the thing. So if you integrate it into your product, you do changes because you solder it to your product. You maybe have custom code. You leave the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth stack alone, but you're soldering to this. There's capacitance added onto the pins. There are additional components. There are high frequency signals, whatever. There's always something changing. If you can prove that it's still okay, then it's okay. But if you're unsure about that, you better get the information somehow. How do you do that? You do the certifications, you do the testing. Once you've done the test, everything is okay. If you leave the module as it is, so this is one of the cases where it really depends on your product. Because if you use the firmware the module comes with, usually these come with AT firmware, for example, you leave it as is, you integrate it, the chance that your project still performs the same way than it was tested is pretty high. But if you change something, there's a chance it won't.
But
And the
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, the big difference, like the general difference between how this FCC system works and the CE system is that under CE, you as the manufacturer have to guarantee that your product fulfills all the requirements that it has. The way you prove that, that's on you. There
Mm-hmm.
are there are common and usual ways that you do with harmonized standards, with the usual lab tests. This is the way, but the actual law is you prove that however you can. Here is a way that we accept. FCC works differently. There's an accredited lab. You send the product there. They test it. They give you back something like this here. I'll just put that up on screen. So this is for the ESP32S3 Room 1 module. This has been tested by an authorized lab, and now it has passed all the requirements, and it's now basically a module. This is what you get from Espressif that you can download on the website. So this is an FCC report, and it's an authorization for this specific equipment, for this module. If you have a different variant of that module, you would have a different document.
Mm-hmm. I have a question what I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
So if the module has antenna,
Mm-hmm.
then placing module in different places in your PCB may modify the parameters of the antenna, correct?
Exactly, yeah. And that's the thing. How would I be able to guarantee that this module performs the same way if you integrate it in this or that product? I can't control how you are integrating it. I can just give the guidelines, this integration guide. And if you don't adhere to it, well, that's on you. So I can only tell you how you can integrate it and still keep it the same. But if you change something, then it's everybody's game. So you would have to retest it to be exactly sure. So it's a very narrow road that you can take where you can actually say, okay, this still performs the same way. Usually companies test that with a pre-compliance check to be sure that the integration is correct before they make that statement that it's still okay, and they would avoid the more costly radioactive tests. So you can, in general, if you do compliance lab tests, the radioactive tests are usually 10 times more expensive than the EMC tests.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to avoid those if possible. And if they can be sure that the module still performs the same, then hooray, you have saved a lot of money, like they claimed here. That only works under FCC rules. Yeah. And why it's the same module. It does perform. And I'm I'm uh, I'm going a bit ahead here. If you're looking at the actual lab tests that you have to perform, the limit lines and whatever for FCC and CE requirements are quite similar. So
This
if
was my
you're
next question. This was my next
yeah,
question. Like,
so
which one, if you certify in one country, uh, can you be
okay,
quite sure? Maybe.
I'm European, I'm Austrian, so I will have a very Eurocentric perspective to this, but I've put the product on the market like in wide ways and start with CE.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because that's the most involved process, and once you've cleared that, it's quite easy to clear the rest, and you can do the required tests for FCC at the same time you do the CE tests.
Mm-hmm.
The requirements are quite similar.
Mm-hmm.
Same goes for UKCA. Would you now do UKCA? Well, it depends. But if from now and we have July 2025, I would say go for CE.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do UKCA because it's accepted for some time now. In the UK, you don't have to have UKCA, but if you're a domestic supplier in the United Kingdom, you might want to put that
Mm-hmm.
on your product because people will look for it. So there are certain things you have to think about when deciding, but I would always start with CE,
Mm-hmm.
just because if you have everything in order for CE for the full package, you have a much easier time with everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And Europe is a big market. You want to serve that. There's a lot
Okay.
of money to be made there.
Okay, I made these two questions. I made notes about these two questions, but you answered it, and so good. We can move ahead.
So we have a big difference between FCC and
Mm-hmm.
CE. So I've noticed already that the way this FCC module approach works doesn't work in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because these systems have very, very different requirements. They work completely differently. I want you to like make note of a very specific thing. It's not the same. They're not connected, and there is no replacement. You can't say, I'm gonna go for the FCC system and then it will be okay everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm only going CE. No. If you're selling your product within Europe, and not only the European Union, there are other places that also accept CE. For example, Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, Turkey, all big markets that you may want to serve, they all accept CE. So it's a bit more than the European Union. And you also don't want to ignore the American market, of course, because that is a very big market. And once you have cleared your product in Europe, it's usually not that hard to get it cleared for the American market.
Mm-hmm.
The requirements for safe products are quite similar. So if it's, I would always advise people to go for the strictest market that they target first, because if you clear that one, all the others are a breeze. So go for Germany. That's it's usually the strictest. Except if you want to do toys, then go for Poland. Yeah. So it's always easier to or better to target the biggest hurdle first. So the in the USA, just very, very broadly, yeah. Don't take this as gospel. This is a very very shallow overview. In the USA, you have your product category your product falls into. There are certain rules that apply to it. In case of if your product has wireless, there will be FCC rules. There will
Mm-hmm.
be more in other legislation, but we're now focusing on these wireless modules. There are applicable standards that you have to fulfill, and you give your module or your product to an accredited lab that will test that and issues a certification.
Mm-hmm.
What they issue is this thing here, if I can open it. Yeah. So this is one of these
Can you find these on internet
certifications.
if you would like to check someone else's product if it has certification
Oh
or?
you can if like any reputable manufacturer has their data sheet for their parts online, of course. And the same goes for their modules. They usually have these certifications. So if you go to the Espressif website, you can download that. I just downloaded that a few days ago.
But
You
FCC
can
doesn't have any website where you could find it?
I think there's a where you could enter the ID and it will tell you if that product and that ID match.
Mm-hmm.
So in case you encounter a counterfeit product or fake one, then you could see, oh, this ID doesn't actually show up with
Mm-hmm.
that specific name of the product, then you might want to look into a different supplier.
Okay.
But yeah, and there's, of course, on the same homepage, I can also look up another thing, and I looked for the CE declaration of conformity, and this thing came up. But it's also from the Espressif homepage. And it says EU type examination certificate. That's not the same that we've seen here. This one says EU declaration of conformity. Which one is wrong?
I don't know.
Well,
Your camera
it
is
says,
your
yeah,
camera is gone.
whoop, now it's back. So EU declaration of conformity. Actually, just declaration of conformity is enough. This is the correct document.
Mm-hmm.
This is a page that tells me what this module is, who built it, who is selling it, who's the named EU representative. That's a new thing since last year. So it's this entity in Ireland that's within the EU. So that's the EU representative. And we declare under sole responsibility, blah, 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 a lot of legal jumbo, but it says this thing is compliant with this legislation, this legislation, this legislation. This is actually a bit of a bonus, it even tells you which standards they use to verify that. You actually only have to like say this directive is what is valid for this product and this product is correct. We guarantee that as a manufacturer. It's very common and usual, and I like it when people do that. They also tell you which standard they use, and I especially like that they use an ETSI standard because these are free. So you can actually look up that standard and don't have to pay for them. Fun fact, you have to pay for standards. A lot of people don't know that. They are quite expensive and sometimes they aren't that big. And ETSI standards, these are only for radio equipment. Those are usually free.
Do you have some tips where people can download it? I think this will be next question, definitely.
Oh yeah. Basically, when we do the assessment and stuff for clients and stuff, we usually give them links. Usually, when they have to buy a specific standard, then I look for the cheapest source and I give them the link so you can have it. I am not allowed to like resell standards or whatever, or just download it and give it away. That's illegal copying because it's like a
Of
book.
course,
You
yeah,
have to
yeah.
buy a book.
But
And
I mean, like first, where they can find out what kind of standard they need, and then where they can find the standards to buy them. So you already mentioned there are multiple sources where you can buy it.
yeah, there are national standardization institutes
Can we
where
go on
can
website just for
buy them.
examples?
Oh yeah. So here's my website, but we're going Austrian standard. This, for example, is Austrian standards. This is the Austrian Standardization Institute. Then there is one that I really like to use is the Estonian one.
Mm-hmm.
This is they have a very good search, which is not really loading at the moment. But yeah, that's basically Austrian and the German DIN. These are usually the most common ones. But I especially like the Estonian one because they have everything not just in Estonian, they also have it in English, and they usually are. Um, they have. I think this is a bit going into the deep end, but the usually you have standards and then you have amendments to them. So there's a main document and additional documents, and with a lot of the institutes, you have to buy them all separately.
Mm-hmm.
And if there are amendments, then the Estonian one always has one package where everything is in there. So you can download that in one PDF. It's much better.
Mm-hmm.
My opinion. You're not missing out on a specific new thing that they added.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then how do you figure out which one you need?
You're coming a lot ahead of us. This is basically the biggest question that everybody has, and the first thing that they have to think about is when you start your product, yeah, you have to make an assessment. So the first thing you have to do, this would be the perfect thing for a CE 101 video. But you first have to figure out what rules apply to your product. And once you know that, you can figure out which standards you can use to assess conformity to those rules. So the laws are what you have to follow, and the standards are recipes to fulfill that law. Standards are not laws. That's very important. Like the rules actually don't tell you you have to use this specific standard. They tell you these are the requirements. Here are harmonized standards. Harmonized means they are valid across the whole EU. If you use these standards, these are usually like the EMC testing procedures. Those are harmonized standards, for example. If you do it that way, we will just accept that and say, okay, that's okay. We know that if you did it that way, it will be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what these modules do basically, they have to apply all the rules that apply to them. They have to do the tests according to standards, and then they can mark them. And what they mark them with is the CE mark. So you have the FCC logo on there because it has an FCC ID, and you have the CE mark because they had to run through the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
That is for their product that you're selling. The company is selling me these modules. This is a product from their perspective. I am the customer. They can only put this to market if it follows all the rules that apply to it. So now it falls under CE, so it has to be CE marked and certified. They did that. Now they can sell it legally to me. Now I have a thing with a CE mark on there, and I put that on my project again. Now there's a CE mark on this whole thing. Does that mean my product is now CE certified?
No.
No. No. It's the same as if you put a sticker on something else. The sticker is not now like overruling the rest of it.
Mm-hmm. But
It's just
I'm sorry for interrupting. Still, I still would like to ask, like, so for example, if there is a website where I can describe or I can find, like, based on the board what I'm designing, like I'm designing a toy, electronic toy. So
mhm.
is there a website where I say I'm designing electronic toy, what kind of standards I need to follow, or what
Okay,
kind of rules?
we're drifting away from the topic, but it's a good question. The thing is, there are, depending on where you are. For example, I know like for example, I'm registered with the Austrian Chamber of Commerce to
Mm-hmm.
do CE assessments, and there's even like subsidies and whatever. So basically, I'm a registered consultant with them, and they have on the website uh, just a little questionnaire where you're supposed to click a few things, and then at the end, it will tell you which rules apply.
Oh, okay.
The reality is, the questions are, does your product fall under paragraph something something,
Ah, okay.
subsection something something something? How should I know? I have no clue about this. That's the reality now. Now you don't know what you have to click. In a few cases, it's obvious. There's one question, is your product an elevator? No, it's not an elevator. Okay, well, the elevator regulation doesn't apply then. Is your product a sporting boat? No. Okay, that's the next one. But does your product fall under the subsection blah 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 of regulations so and so? Now it gets hard.
Oh, so this is why
Yeah,
companies should maybe talk to someone who actually
yeah,
does this all the time, and then they know what kind of.
exactly. They now have like an AI assistant thing where you type in your question, then it gives something back, and they decided, okay, this AI thing is good in writing up stuff, but we still have our own staff check it before we send it out
Mhm.
because sometimes it just writes misinformed garbage.
Mm.
They check that, and in a very big amount of cases where your question is like you don't know how specific you have to be with your question to get the right answer. You don't know all the facts, or maybe you're missing some details that only the experts
Mhm.
know that matter. Then basically in a lot of cases their answer back is, well, our AI found this, but we think you should really talk to an expert about
Mhm.
this.
I
And
understand.
that's in the vast majority of cases, either you have somebody in your vicinity who is very experienced and has a very, very similar product, you could talk to them, or usually the easier way is go to an expert.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, we can continue.
And yeah. And so so basically now you have a module that has these two markings on there, but the actual module approach is only valid in the USA. And they even have a thing for that. It's called the FCC Integration Guide. There it is. So this is from the FCC's Module Integration Guide, and it has some specifics in here, and basically it tells you what I've told you before. You have to make sure that the module still performs the same.
Mhm.
You have to follow the integration rules of the manufacturer to make sure that works. Okay, that's great. Now we have a certified module that we can use in the USA. Great. So what's now with EU? I've shown you this thing from the ESP, from the Espressif website, and it says EU type examination certificate. And we see a lot of standards that they used. Here are some ETSI standards again, and it all passed, and that's very good. This is a lab report.
Mhm.
This is what the laboratory did. They made the tests and they said it's passing. That's
Oh,
great.
I know
But
what's the
this is not a
difference. I know
declaration
what's
of
the difference.
conformity.
Yeah.
That's
So
the
the
wrong
difference is
thing.
the first one was saying like we declare that it's okay, but this one is only report from measurements.
And this is something that you get so often, especially from American and from Chinese suppliers. Because if you're if you're used to the FCC system, then I say, okay, here's my thing. I send it to a lab. I get a report back. This is the thing that I upload. This is what you get from the lab. Perfectly fine. But what we actually need is a document that says, this is the module. This is who we are. We declare and guarantee that this is according to all these standards, not just these ones. As you can see, they tested for EMC radio. What if there is another rule set that applies to that? Doesn't mention it here. And also, this is from the laboratory. The applicant is expressive, not the like Eurofins did the testing. So that's not the same thing.
But it's still
So you have
better
to
than
be
nothing, correct?
the worst thing that you can do regards any certification stuff is do nothing. If you just ignore everything, that is really bad because that's gross
Wait.
So, okay, you now get a document that declares this all these rules apply to my product, and I, as a manufacturer, guarantee it fulfills all these requirements. This is what you want. I don't need to show you the test report. That's only for authorities to see if they have questions, and they often have. But you have to have this declaration. So now Espressif uploaded the wrong document. Is that a violation? Not in particular, no. The only thing is if I ask for a declaration of conformity, and every customer has the right to do that, every consumer can ask for that, then they have to give you that. So they could still say, oh, sorry, mistake, here's the right one. It's just a courtesy of them to have all these documents on their webpage for download. Strictly speaking, with most products that you put on the market, usually in the manual, you also have the declaration of conformity printed into it. You also have safety notices. These come from different regulations. These usually come from the General Product Safety Regulation or are part of some CE requirements. They're usually a separate piece because they can change from time to time, so you don't have to reprint the whole manual. Same goes for the declaration of conformity. Sometimes they are just printed in. Sometimes they are separate pieces of paper. There is currently a bit of debate and some changes if you actually have to have them printed or if you can just have a QR code or a link where people can download them. In general, most reputable manufacturers have these documents on their website for download because a lot of procurement people will look up these documents before they make a decision to buy their stock. And that's something that you should do. So if you're looking into using a specific module, check out the webpage, see where they have certification in which parts of the world. Is that what matches your project? It's always better to have more documentation than less, and you will need these documents later on for your own documentation.
I have a question. I have a question now.
Yeah.
Is there difference in these certification requirements if you only sell PCB, which has to be mounted into a product?
You're referring to the sub-assemblies. So there's a thing. That's one of the big differences in USA and Europe. We now called these things modules, pre-certified modules in particular, but there are also things like, for example, this processor and stuff, which is also a module, and you can just put it onto something and you can sell. This is basically, for me, this is a component. I buy this like I buy resistors and then I put it on my board. Under CE, components do not require CE.
So even whole PCB can be component?
And this is where the tiny details matter. Yeah. Not everything can be counted as a component. Things that are monolithic, like even an IC is a die in a package. It's not a monolithic thing, but it's treated as one. So if your thing is really a self-contained module, it doesn't. There's debate if it has to have like a shielding can and whatever. It's really in the details. But if it's treatable like a component, and if it's not used by a consumer, or it's not usable by a consumer, you could treat this as a component, but it really boils down to the difference. Is this Arduino a component? It's
That's
all in one
question.
thing, and I
Yeah,
could
yeah,
just
yeah.
plug it in or solder it to something. Yeah,
But
but it's also
many
a thing
people
that
sell
you
it also to
use
customers
as a product.
directly.
Somebody plugs that in and use. You see where it's usable. So the EU regulation has a term for that, and they say sub-assemblies by OEM manufacturers are exempt. What is a sub-assembly only used by an OEM manufacturer? R&D prototypes are exempt in some regulations, not in others. That's also a thing. CE is not one piece of regulation, it's multiple that interact with each other. And you have to like really know if your particular thing falls into a specific category. Yeah. In just to give you like a big notion about it, but you know, it always depends on the details. If a thing is on not on the free market, you can't just go to a website, click buy and get it. You can only get it with an OEM contract manufacturer contract, NDA stuff, whatever. So you have to approach the company who makes it, then you make a purchase agreement and whatever, and then you get supplied these parts and you have a contract that says, I'm integrating this into this product, nothing else. I'm not selling on the parts and whatever. That will likely be such a sub-assembly.
Hmm.
If it's something that I can just go on a website and buy in whatever quantity, it will not be a sub-assembly. In the American law, if a thing like on a PCB, like the Adafruit modules, for example, is a really popular example. These have no function without being connected to something else.
Hmm.
The American way is a bit more broad and open. You say if the thing itself doesn't have a function on its own, it can't perform any function. It's just basically a sub component to build different things. That's a sub-assembly, and those are exempt from a lot of rules. Not all,
Hmm.
but from a lot. Because then you would take this, put it into another thing, and now you have to certify the bigger thing.
Okay.
Speaking of bigger thing,
Yeah, we need to
uh,
move back to our topics. I'm sorry for
yeah, yeah,
asking this
yeah,
question, but
we can make additional videos if people are
yeah,
interested
yeah.
into the
So
details.
if everyone is interested, leave comments. Okay, what kind of topics you would like to hear
I
about?
could talk for days on this stuff.
We need to speed up because this is
Yeah, yeah,
super
we have
interesting.
stuff to cover.
It is super interesting, and we are on slide 5.
So under EU, it works a bit differently. First, CE is not the big thing. The big thing is GPSR, General Product Safety Regulation. That's the new one. That's now there was an old one that is named a little bit differently, but think about we were talking in the new terms. GPSR, General Product Safety Regulation. 99% of products will fall under this. Something that doesn't fall under it is military equipment. They have their own special rules. Aircraft stuff
Medical.
has their own special rules. But if you're selling to consumers, you will, in 99% of cases, unless you're selling food, then you will fall under this regulation. And then once you've taken that, this has its own requirements. For example, the risk analysis is now, before it was only mandated for certain products under their specific CE rules. Now, every product that falls under the general product safety regulations, so almost everything, has to have a risk analysis. Whatever that is, we can make a different video about that. Let's not get into that too early. So once we know that, now we have CE. Now we have to find out which regulation applies. This is what's usually completely disregarded by people. Yeah, do it the same way the other thing that's similar to mine did it. Don't do that. That's a trap you can fall into. This is usually where you first consult an expert, at least for an individual hour or whatever. Then based on these, you select the harmonized standards, then testing. It's also a big question mark because sometimes you have to do some tests, sometimes more, sometimes less. Documentation, and then you issue this declaration of conformity.
Hmm.
And then, only then, when you've passed all this, you put the CE mark on your product. If you do it without that, that's very bad. Also, you can't put a CE mark on like everything. You can't just do the process for everything and put a CE mark on all the things. That's also a violation. So it's not just where you have to put it, but also where you're allowed to put it.
So I'm now curious because is not there something like self-declaration,
Yeah.
and what does it
Okay.
then mean? Do you need to
So
go through all these or?
yeah. So I
Oh,
have it
yeah, it's
here
the
in
next
bold.
point. I didn't see it.
Self-certification. Yeah, but it leads naturally to it. Self-certification is a process, not a document. We've seen the FCC document. That's a document. That's big confusion out there. What is a certification? What is a certificate? If I do a course on Fed level, I get a course certificate afterwards that certificates that I've done the course. I myself have a certification as a CE product coordinator. I have a certification number that allows me to do all this stuff. So this is not the same. Certification in the sense of CE is a process. You have to go through the process, and at the end, you issue this manufacturer, as a manufacturer, issue this declaration of conformity. That is the self-certification.
Hmm.
That is what you're doing. You, as the manufacturer, say, I did all the work. I know my product is compliant. How I did that, that's my cup of tea. But if I apply the harmonized standards, which 99% of people will usually do, then it's clear how you assess this conformity. And that is the actual self-certification. So it's me, the manufacturer, who says this is all okay.
So do you think there are companies who just put CE logo on the product, and
I
then
have
if
a
someone asks
collection.
for something, then they will do it later?
I have a collection of people of products in violation. I collect these. Like whenever I find a product that is not allowed to have a CE mark, and
Huh?
it still has one, I collect it. And same goes for stuff that really needs to be marked and doesn't. So I collect these and keep it in my stash. So maybe I can use them as examples down the line. But there are a lot, a lot. Usually, if somebody complains about that, it doesn't take long for consequences, but it can also take a very long time because they don't have to issue like fines right away. They can wait for 10 years. If it's just a little bit, they can just wait until there's another thing. And when they think, oh, now it's getting like, oh, somebody is systematically gambling the system or something, then you get a much bigger trouble. So they
Hmm.
just because you think you're like flying under the radar doesn't mean you're actually flying under the radar. They don't have to act on this like immediately,
So
and everybody
how
can report a product. Yeah,
oh, that's
that's
what I wanted to ask. How they find out about these products which are not certified but use logo.
yeah.
So someone has to report them.
There are usually two ways. One is there has been an accident.
Hmm.
So if there is somebody got hurt, then usually the insurance will check all these documents and see if there is something wrong with the product that was involved in the accident, because that's the way they usually can get out of paying.
Hmm.
So they are very interested in that. The
Hmm.
other thing is competitors can look at your product and
Hmm.
say, oh, this one is not okay, and they can report it. You, as the manufacturer, actually have to report your own products if you find out it's not okay. Maybe something has changed. Maybe quality control is part of CE.
Hmm.
If your quality control is off, you know that because somebody reported or you find your own testing, then you have to issue this warning to the authorities, and then they may instruct you to do a recall. This is how recalls usually get started by a manufacturer reporting their own product. If you don't do that, it's also a big violation. If you know that your product has problems and could hurt somebody and you're not issuing a recall, that's bad. And the third thing is a consumer can look at the product, doesn't get the right documentation. Maybe they asked for a CE declaration of conformity, they didn't get it. Maybe they wanted a manual in their native language, which you have to provide. They didn't get it, now they can report it. Everybody can get that. I personally had to report a product that I got from a big online store everybody knows, and I've seen it online and they can't sell that thing. And then I ordered it and it came and but like not correctly marked. It was just a really dangerous product. So I reported that one, and that was taken off the market within 2 days. So that was because that is if some like I know what I'm doing if I'm like plugging this in. If somebody else would touch it in the wrong way, they could die. So that's why I had to report it because that is not okay that this thing is even sold. So this is the extreme examples. It can, but it's usually it can be as little as the size of the font used for the safety warnings isn't big enough. Stuff like that. And
No, we can continue.
yeah,
This is so interesting topic.
yeah.
I really hope maybe we could also
I
make.
did a deep dive for the last 3 years into that topic. It's so cool. Uh, so yeah, one thing that you really have to know is that the costs for all this certification stuff can vary by a lot. They advertised in these previous slides, oh yeah, you're saving so much money by using pre-certified modules, which is right, but we've learned only under FCC, and it only refers to the radio directives, not EMC. You still have to do your EMC testing, and that still has a cost attached. And you still, under the FCC rules, have to do that with a lab. But overall, your certification costs might be a lot lower. This is what they're basically advertising with. And that's true. It's just not viable everywhere. So this was okay, yeah. This is the CE process that we already talked about.
No,
So now,
go back, go back.
yeah.
So what is the process?
So this
You
is
just put it.
directly
You
from the
just put it
EU
there.
homepage. So this is basically how does CE work? First, it's your responsibility as the manufacturer. You ensure conformity with all EU-wide requirements. So first find out what these are and how they apply to your product. Then you have to assess that by yourself. Actually, you can do the whole thing completely by yourself. This is what I wanted to do. Then I got down into this rabbit hole so much that I did the certification to become a consultant for that. Because it's at some point you need to learn so much about this stuff that either you dive deep, or you don't and just ask an expert. Is what do you want to spend your time with? Reading a lot of legislation or building stuff? This is where you start consulting an expert. It's the same for everything. Do you want to solder everything by hand, or do you buy a pick and place or give it to an assembly house? It's the same decision basically. So I decided to type deep because I like that.
Okay,
um,
so I think many companies they do it the way, for example, they do ESD, EMI, this kind of basic test, and
mhm.
they keep these documents as some kind of like proof that there is nothing wrong with their products, and then they feel confident to put the marking on the top of the product. I don't know.
Which is correct, yeah.
Okay.
This is the correct. First, you find out what rules apply, which tests you have to do, or what tests are suitable to make sure that everything is okay. You do these tests, you document everything, you put it all into a nice little folder, you issue a declaration of conformity, put the marking on, that's it.
Okay.
Big companies have their own compliance labs sometimes. They have their own specialized personnel for that. And sometimes they use external experts all the time. One big misconception that big companies have with that is that if you have a consultant, like the qualifications that I did, is I can basically go into a company and do that for them. But the manufacturer is always the responsible person. There's only one very, very niche system where I can actually give that responsibility to an external contractor. which is a terrible idea from a business standpoint. But in theory, it's possible. Yeah, usually you would only do that, like the CEO takes care of all operations, and then there's a chief compliance officer, usually somebody who's also founded the company or something who does that. And he's now responsible for that. Usually it's the CEO who's responsible.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the only thing where I say, okay, this is okay if you split these responsibilities into the two founders, for example, because they like different things in their work life. That makes sense. But to, you can, but you would never really give an outside consultant that kind of power because they can basically, if you have an argument with him, they can basically take your company hostage.
Mm-hmm.
You can't put out any product if they don't approve it, and you have to register that with the government and stuff. So if they don't say it's okay, you can't put out product. That would be bad. So
Okay.
what people have to have in mind is you are always, as the manufacturer, responsible for it. That never changes. And this is what you're doing with this declaration. You're saying, I'm the manufacturer, I did this, and I know it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
You could just sign the declaration of conformity without doing all the tests. That's actually what people do in very specific cases when they actually know from how the things are built and the type of product and whatever, that all the tests will just yield zero because there's no EMI, there's just nothing there, but it still applies, still some rules apply. It's one of the many ways you can go about CE, but it's in 99% of cases, this is you will have to do the tests first to be sure that everything is fine.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you use a pre-certified module, you should at least do a pre-compliance test if you're selling it in America to know that it's still okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if there is something off in the pre-compliance check, then just do the normal certification because you can't be sure anymore.
We can mention this. So pre-compliance test, it means you will not get the official certificate, you just get the measurements or something.
Usually under CE, you basically get the actual measurements, like they make photos of the setup, they give you charts, usually CSV files with the actual data points. You archive that all. In the end, it will say, we did the test according to these standards. It did pass, fail, whatever. The whole thing, you pack that up and put that into your documentation. That's what you want.
Mm-hmm. And this pre-certification or pre-compliance process is basically much cheaper than the
Yes.
compliance.
It's a simplified setup. It's all smaller. It's using different methods that give you not the same measurements, but an indication of if your product will fail or pass. So if you're over the limit lines in the pre-compliance, there's no chance you will
Mm-hmm.
pass the big tests. If you are very much below the limit lines in your pre-compliance check, there's a very high chance you will pass. That's
Mm-hmm.
what you want. You
Mm-hmm.
want to make pre-compliance check after pre-compliance check until you're very sure that when I go now to the lab, I will pass and I will not waste money on retesting again and again because that's expensive. Pre-compliance check in comparison is cheap.
Oh, this is interesting because for some reason I thought some of these the difference is mostly in documentation and in the stamp or something. So there are
Uh,
the tests actually itself, they are more extensive.
well, the it depends on the tests. The for example, for conducted emissions, the test setup is very similar.
Mm-hmm.
But for radiated emissions, it can be very different.
Mm-hmm.
In radiated, you will have big chamber, 3 meters away. There's a specific antenna at a specific height. You can't have that room in your normal laboratory. Instead, you use a TEM cell, which is basically simulating that big space in small with a strip line in the middle. And then mathematical, you can extrapolate these measurements to what your thing would have measured in the big cell. But it's just a mathematical method. There are standards in the works I've heard that specifically deal with TEM cells. So maybe TEM cells will be a method for big tests in the future. But as of now, this is a way to basically get a very good indication for your product in a smaller, cheaper, easier to handle setup. And for doing it at your job site, you don't have to rent the lab
Yeah,
space for
yeah,
that.
I understand. Okay, well,
But
let's go to the next one because
yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry.
So, okay, now finally, sorry, when does a module actually make sense? So we've seen if you are under FCC, you're selling in America, among other things. But if you're selling in America, a pre-certified module makes sense if you're using it exactly for what this module is intended for. If I use a Wi-Fi module exactly for Wi-Fi with its stock firmware, just as a connectivity module, very good chance this is a great case for a module. It's often cheaper to just buy a module. Like I have, these are €3 something. If I would put in the engineering time to build something like that myself and do the assembly and the debugging and the impedance matching and the antenna matching and the
Firmware.
see, I just wanted to have Wi-Fi on my board. I didn't want to go into like full RF developer mode. So if my goal is to just put that Wi-Fi onto my board, modules are a really great way. If I do something very specific with RF, something that this module is maybe not intended for, maybe I need more precision, more power, more sensitivity, a specific special type of antenna, some very weird firmware, whatever. If I have any requirements that deviate from what these modules are intended for, a module will not be the best way. It will be usually cheaper to engineer everything from scratch than trying to change a module. Yeah, pre-certified module has a higher likelihood of yielding a compliant overall product. It has already been tested for these specific things. There is a big chance this won't do something strange to your overall product. So there is no guarantee because you're connecting external stuff to it. You can change, like if my routing is god awful on this board, which it is, then this will likely mess up the EMC performance of the whole thing. But it would be even worse if I would have my own RF solution, my own crappy routing. The chances are not very good. So this is something that gives me a better chance. There's no guarantee. So you have to be sure and have to test that. Yeah. If you change something, pre-certification is void. We talked about that. There are lines where you can walk in between, but easiest case is I have some of them here. Same module as before, but these don't have PCB antennas. They have an IPEX connector. This is supposed to connect to an antenna. Which antenna?
They should specify, I guess.
Yeah, they in the documents in the integration guide, the manufacturer specifies exactly which antenna. Raspberry Pi, for example, does a great job with that. They have a specific antenna they sell that is made as an external antenna for Raspberry Pis. If you use that antenna, the whole thing is still compliant. If you use that for your product, there's a bigger chance that it will all be fine. There's no guarantee, bigger chance. Yeah? If you use any antenna, nobody knows. Yeah, FCC exemption, really important. That's an American thing, and it does not exempt you from EMC testing. You still have to check that. And one thing that I have to say countless times in my daily life is the sum of CE certified products is not automatically compliant. I use this thing, and both are CE certified. I put them together. Whatever this is has to be looked at as it is independently. So just because I put a module on here that has CE on there, and maybe I put this module onto an Arduino Mega, which has also CE on here, doesn't mean that my outcome now is compliant. There is no guarantee. I have to look at this as it is. Sometimes, it's just I'm deviating from the topic, but sometimes I have to tell customers that reconsider if you really want to manufacture this thing, because you could also buy this thing, sell them both in a bundle, and you already had the functionality and you're saving yourself so much trouble.
Oh,
Yeah, there are points
so
where
customers
custom
will
hardware
connect them
doesn't make
together.
sense. Yeah, there are points where custom hardware makes all the sense, but there are points where a device, a cable, another device sold as a bundle with a piece of software is better than making one big product out of it. It really depends on the details. Yeah. But the most important thing is C plus C does not equal C compliance. You have to look at it as the way it is put into circulation or on the market. This is you look at it like it's a completely built from scratch new thing every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these sub-assembly rules, we also covered that, do not apply in Europe. The ones you find all over the internet. In very, very specific cases, there are exemptions. And if you find an exemption in one regulation, for example, in EMC, there is an exemption for R&D, research and development things. And say, oh, this is a development kit. That's research. I don't have to EMC test it. Wrong. Research and development is defined, and it's usually a one-off thing for a specific research project. You have to document that.
So
And
it's even
if a
for
bit,
project, not for company, for project.
no, it can also be for a company. It doesn't matter that much really. But the thing is, it's not something that is produced in series and just put on the market and everybody can buy it. It's made for a very specific purpose and only for that purpose. Nobody else can get it. And that's only EMC. There are other regulations that apply to your product. And it's does so okay, it doesn't have to, let's pretend it does apply. Then there's still RHS, for example. RHS also requires a CE mark. You're back in the process. So it's you see how people can get trapped when they look at exemptions and they try to find an exemption that applies to their thing. Don't look for that exemption. Look for what actually applies to your product. It makes much more sense. Yeah, and on that note, compliance is just more than just EMC and RED.
So
And
red is like
especially
FCC,
RED is the Radio Equipment Directive.
but
Yeah,
it's
that's
kind of
common acronym. It's everything that has to do with radios. That's the term
oh, so
under CE.
FCC is not only for a radio. FCC is for
FCC also FCC is basically is an institution. They deal with all radio communication regulation, and radiation is not only intended radiation, like wireless communication, it's also unintentional radiation. If you Google stuff about FCC, you will find that term intentional radiator and unintentional radiator quite a lot. And the unintentional radiation, that's what we usually deal with electromagnetic compatibility.
EMC, EMI.
And that's also uh, one of the things that FCC deals with. I'm using the term RED here because that's European centric. That's the Radio Equipment Directive, the
So that's
European
more
one.
for the one which is transmitting, for example, intentionally
Yeah,
something.
RED only deals with stuff that is intentionally transmitting
Intentionally,
something.
okay.
EMC is like there's the same deviation,
Okay.
but the actual border between these is not the same in both regulations. It's a bit murky.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's very important that when we look at certification for a thing, we're not just locked into our electrical engineering ways, because product compliance is so much bigger. I've told you about the general product safety regulation that has nothing to do with electronics. Basically, it's a here are some safety requirements. For example, the biggest rule in there is you're only allowed to put safe products on the market. If your product is dangerous, it doesn't belong on the market. That's the one thing that is its main thing. Safe. Every product has to be safe. So if it's dangerous, it won't fly. And then the specific CE regulations, they go into the details
Yeah.
about how know.
I understand. Yeah.
Like then it gets into electronics, but that also applies to a candle, to cooking ware, whatever. So stuff that has nothing to do with electronics. So don't get locked into that. A lot of times when people Google stuff around and the answers that they find, there are a lot of EMC consultants and whatever, and they give you answers for their specific field for EMC. But there's so much more, and you were actually asking about the bigger thing. And then you get the impression there's nothing around it. You're only focusing on that thing, and then you forget uh, the actual bigger part. Like these electronic specific things are actually just a tiny small part of the whole thing. And they are one of the easier parts. And I don't want to scare people with it's also hard. That's not, it's just the amount of work. Because once you have figured out what rules apply, you give it to a lab, they do the hard work, and then you do the documentation. Your engineering is your actual work, and on the actual process for certification, the biggest part is all the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you don't be scared of EMC and RED. It's just a little part that's easy to handle if you know how. And to know that, get help early on. Whenever you're thinking, I'm stuck, I don't think this is right, I don't know how to proceed with it, just get a little bit of help, and but try to do as much as possible on your own, because that helps you in the long run. You're then able to figure out a few things,
Yeah, because
and
you will learn, and then you can apply it in future.
exactly, and you once you know about these things, then you can design with the regulations in mind. You can
Yeah.
from the very beginning, you can say, I want my product really, really to have a Bluetooth controller. But I also know about a few specifics about Bluetooth, so I will rather choose Wi-Fi for that. So I use a different module and I save money and whatever. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
you have an easier time selecting your parts. You can say, oh, this product doesn't need the best battery life in the world, but it really, really needs to be safe in EMC. So I'm not using a crazy switching regulator. I'm just using an LDO because it doesn't matter in that case. And I can save money and whatever. And you can design with these requirements in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Or the opposite. I really need that, and I need to have perfect routing and maybe extra shielding because I need that special switching regulator for best battery efficiency. Yeah. And if you can, do pre-compliance checks
Yeah, we were
early
talking
on.
about this.
Yeah. And yeah, don't waste lab time. That's very expensive. Be sure that your thing will pass before you hit the lab. And that also applies if you're using modules.
Mm.
And I want to like a quick word on not all modules are created equal. Quality control is part of the CE process. And I've heard multiple reports about batches not being consistent in their
Mm-hmm.
antenna matching across multiple batches of
Even same
modules.
manufacturer.
Yeah, on the same manufacturer, same module, it's just a different batch. So you should, in your quality control procedure, you should also check that performance. That could be a quick software-based check. It could be having a little test setup where you just run each board and see if there is a spike in a frequency you don't want, or if the RSSI value for your Wi-Fi is different than normal. Stuff like that, where you can
Mm-hmm.
see, oh, the antenna matching might be off. So quality control is a thing, and just because you're having used, just because you're using a module doesn't mean it's always perfect. It's the same if you're using, if you're designing your RF circuits from scratch and you're putting your antenna directly on the board or using an external antenna, maybe the antenna is not plugged in correctly. Stuff like that can happen. You still need to be aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
So there are, yeah. So now
And
we
I
have
would like to
some
mention,
really complex. Oh,
go
sorry.
back. I would like to mention,
Yeah.
because you say like before going to the test lab, so some of the test labs they will do this pre-compliance check. So people don't need to do it in their lab if they don't have equipment. They still can go to the test lab, but they will need to pay, but not as much as for the full certification.
Yeah, so a lot of test labs do pre-compliance checks, some don't. Bigger companies usually have their own pre-compliance setups at home or in their companies. Some consultants do have pre-compliance setups. I'm currently building up my own, so we're not operational yet, but I hope to offer that soon. Yeah, but it makes sense. And if you are putting out many products, you might want to invest in your own
Mm-hmm.
pre-compliance setup. That's one. It's like you upgrade your oscilloscope, you upgrade your multimeter, you upgrade your soldering tools. One of these days, you will buy a spectrum analyzer.
And you need to build your own chamber.
Or you use a TEMS cell.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
So there are many ways to go about this. Also, topic for another time. But there are basically I have some really good books by Kenneth Wyatt that tell it with like this is how you build your own compliance kit with like all the cheaper options compared. Do they really work? Here are the caveats with it. Stuff from like very basic stuff to it's almost a real pre-compliance setup. Stuff that you can get and that's affordable to make an assessment on your workbench.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually know like the I've just put out an Element 14% video where I made an ESD detector. It's one of these tools that tell you if the glitches you see in your product are referring to an ESD event or a motor firing or something else, stuff that is sporadically happening and not periodically. That's usually very hard to debug because you can't just it doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
just
I
always
know.
happens when you don't look. And so there's specific test gear that you would accumulate over time for your particular products that you build. So it makes sense to invest in that in the long term.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we can go
And if
to the
you're
next
sure
one.
about it, you can always hire somebody. Yeah. Okay. Can we go to
Yeah,
the example?
yeah. Go page 10.
Yeah. So here are some real world examples. So first we're looking at an Arduino compatible dev kit that has an ESP32 on
Mm-hmm.
there. Uh, I might have one here. Yeah, that's also a thing that I made. So here's a
Mm-hmm.
dev kit, has an ESP32 on there, two USB ports. This one runs Linux, but it doesn't have to. It's just a general case of this is a development kit. What do you do with a development kit? Usually products come in cases. You can't touch it by accident. Makes things a lot safer. Development kits usually come without any case. Why? Because the people who use them will rip away the case anyway and then plug stuff into it. And they will measure on these points. A case doesn't make any sense. There's no uh, safety value added by having the case because that is not its intended use.
Yeah, it's
What
intended
you
for
have to
connecting
think about
other
is
things to
intended
the
use.
board.
Yeah. What the actual user is doing with your board matters. There's even, especially CE is very clear about that. There's intended use. There's unintended use that you also have to specify in your documents. So you can say somebody might use this as a safety critical machine controller. That's an unintended use, but a foreseeable one. That's also a term that's in those regulations. So if you can foresee any misuse, you have to think about it and have to A, make sure it can't be used that way, or inform the customer about it and say in a manual it says, hey, don't use this
In
for safety
elevators.
critical machine control. Yeah, that's not EMC hardened or EMI hardened, for example. There needs to be a shielded case around it first. Stuff like that. So you have to know about the intended use. So now I have my intended use. Let's use this thing is basically a dev kit. It's a PCB. It has components on it. It has a radio module. Here are some pins to plug stuff into it. Now this has the intended use of developing uh, an application on there, like all development kits usually have. So what's the main thing you do with it? You connect stuff to it. So you change the overall thing. You change its physical makeup, but you also put code on it. So you change its software makeup. So now you have two things that don't make the module approach viable anymore. You're changing stuff in uncontrolled ways. The user will change it in weird ways and maybe alter its RF performance. The user may put a completely different Wi-Fi or Bluetooth stack on there, or run some weird code that like scans all the time and spams messages and whatever. You don't know. So would the FCC pre-certification for that module still hold? I'm not so sure about that. So
It's not
it
really
certainly,
like it's not complete product.
yeah, but it is a product. You put if you sell
I know,
this,
you sell it, but the yeah, but what the customer is doing with this, it's yeah.
yeah, and that's the thing. You have to make sure that your product is compliant the way you put it on the in its state where you put it on the market. Absolutely clear. If I sell a consumer product like this, I put it out on the market, the consumer will not change anything about it. It will just use it.
Mm-hmm.
Clear cut case. But in this case, I put it out on the market, and then the intended use is for the user to change it.
So
Now we're,
do you need to do you need to certify it?
yes, yes, you're doing full CE on this thing. And I wouldn't bet on that the module pre-certification will hold. You could argue that way, but from a safety perspective, I would advise for everyone who like builds a dev kit with wireless on there, no matter if they use a module or not, make the whole tests. Make sure that this works, and even make the tests, do the tests with a firmware that does the worst case, that puts the pins high and low in very rapid ways, tries to be an unintentional radiator, be as disgusting as possible in the RF spectrum. Make sure that it still is okay, because that way the chance that a user would run into a problem with it gets lower and lower. So I would test with a worst case, and I would not rely on, oh, this is a pre-certified module, I don't have to. Because in doubt, someone could argue that the intended use is for it to change. So you are already violating the moment you use it, you're violating the terms, the outlines that the module manufacturer has given you, how this module has to be used. So in doubt, do the full thing, do the full certification.
Your camera. Okay. Ah, you noticed
Yeah,
this time. Uh,
I noticed
so
it.
okay, so to so my question would be now: you certify, so you put the wireless module on your board, which is development
Hmm.
kit,
Hmm.
but you know people who are going to buy your development kit, they are going to modify, they are going to connect there some stuff, they are going
Yeah.
to yeah, basically modify the whole system.
Hmm.
But you do certification only for your board. You say, if you use it like this standalone board, that's what is certified. If you connect there anything,
Yeah.
it's your responsibility.
Yeah, you're basically doing that, but there's the
Intentional use.
the unintended use and the foreseeable misuse. So I tell people, this is what you're allowed to do with it, nothing else. Do this, everything is fine. Great. But I also have to think about people will not adhere to that. They will do stuff. And this is why I would build a firmware that is a worst case. I
Mm-hmm.
would do some connections
Mm-hmm.
that's basically build a loop antenna basically on here. And I want to have a worst case, also do that at least a pre-compliance check, but if you can afford it, do, or sometimes labs even do, hey, if we run the test twice and you just have to like flash a bit of code in between, or we just run the test again, it won't be that much more expensive. Then you can be a lot more confident about that this will also be okay if somebody
Hmm.
does a weird thing.
So basically,
Yeah, the
you kind of build the
confidence
circuit around
safety.
the board circuit around what people may do with your board, and you
Yeah,
test it with this.
exactly. You just assume the worst case, what
Hmm.
the worst thing somebody could do with this thing, apart from setting it on fire. And then you will likely be in a safe place. But it's always it's a game of confidence in safety. Are you confident enough to give this thing out into the world, and you know what people will do with it, and it still will be safe? That's the thing. Would you give this to a toddler? Would you give it to a puppy? These are some questions that you usually have with toys and
But
stuff.
I
Yeah.
think toys under 3 years old, they have
Yeah, yeah, they,
completely
they have
different.
their own special rules. Yeah. But usually the thing with the toys and toddler stuff is you give it to the most vulnerable user group. The ones somebody buys this development kit and doesn't know about like if my intended user group is an electronics beginner that doesn't know about logic levels,
Oh,
then then from a safety perspective, I would assume that I should put some logic level translation in here so it doesn't kill it if he puts 5 volts on a pin instead of
yeah.
3.3.
Normally you
Yeah,
do this because people would damage your board. They would say like, "Oh, I did nothing and it just stopped working," and they will send it back to you and they will ask for refund.
exactly. You just touched on the most important thing that I really love about all the like oh, it's just regulation to make my day hard. No. These regulations make two things. They protect the user and they protect you as the
Yeah,
manufacturer. Because if you do everything right onto them, then such cases are of no concern to you. You did everything to make it safe, and if somebody still manages to hurt themselves with, it's not a problem for you. So these are also protecting the manufacturer. And I would argue, this is just my personal opinion, but if you take more care in all these safety things, then you're automatically building better products.
yeah. I
And
remember
everybody wants to build better products.
I mentioned this couple of times actually in my videos before, but this is when we were building one of the first products which I ever built. Uh, it was failing ESD test, and
Mhm.
basically the chip on the board was damaged. And then I was like, "Whew! If we would start sending this to customers,
Mhm.
then there is very high chance that actually we would get returns because they would walk over the carpet and touch the thing and it would damage the chip and they would send it back. So it was really good. We actually
Exactly.
found out during the test, ESD test, that it's going to fail.
Exactly. That's it. That is also uh, one of the big things why sometimes the certification process and the testing and whatever takes sometimes a really big portion of the overall development cycle. And when you're out there and building products, you're only thinking about how do I make this work and not how do I make it safe. And then when the deadline nears and you want to get this on the market, all of a sudden oh, I have half a year in front of me. I can't make that Kickstarter deadline for my delivery because there is a big chunk of work in front of me. And during the testing, you find out, oh, I have a compliance issue. I need to go back and make a new iteration of the board because of, for example, ESD problems. The earlier you think about all these things and do testing early on, the bigger the chance is that you will make your deadline. And it's not like you're starting the process, especially with CE. You're not starting the process, then it has to end, and then you have to go back. You do this while you build your product.
Mm.
All you want to is when you're actually doing the very last iteration, your actual serious run or your zero batch, as it's usually called, the first one that is actually produced on the real machines, but it's not the one that goes on sale. It's just for testing, beta testers, promotion, whatever. That one should be exactly as you put the rest on the market, and all your documents should be in order at exactly that point.
Mm-hmm.
That is the ideal version. That is how you make the best use of the time. Yeah.
Okay, let's continue. So,
Okay, continue. The next example, we have a Bluetooth connected action camera. I use this old camera now as a stand-in. So let's imagine this thing is just an action cam, like a GoPro or whatever, and it has Bluetooth. So we have a consumer product that is as is, consumer gets it and uses it. So we discussed before, okay, the consumer will not change anything about it. Does it make sense to use a module for this product? It does under two circumstances. You can actually fit it in there. The pre-made modules are not the most compact design possible. Sometimes these modules get really small. Like I have an C3 here. These are really tiny for what they are. But is this the most compact design that the RF part of your product could be? Most likely not. So if you are really, really tight on space, you might want to consider doing your RF portion from scratch. You may want to use the actual module design. Some of them are open source. You can just download the files and you can see the schematics and whatever and which components are used. You can rearrange them, maybe change out some. Maybe you don't need that much flash, can save a bit of space. Maybe there's a different package variant of an IC. You could save space. This is where a module might not make the most sense, but there's a different aspect that people forget a lot. I said Bluetooth connected. What is Bluetooth? Bluetooth does work on the same frequency like Wi-Fi, but it's also a trademark and it's a licensing system. And this is also from an Espressif product. This is or like many products, this is their BQB registration, which allows them to use this Bluetooth logo on their devices and call them Bluetooth. You can call everything a wireless thing. Wi-Fi also has something like that.
mm-hmm.
Um, I think I have it here. Yes, for the same product, Wi-Fi certified. If I want to use that Wi-Fi logo, if I want to call it Wi-Fi, I have to register it. This has costs attached. A lot of people forget and call everything Wi-Fi. The people that are usually not that affected by that are the ones that speak German, because in German you say WLAN, wireless LAN. Wi-Fi is not a common term, so they don't fall into that trap that often. But Wi-Fi is around the world a very, very common way to just say wireless connectivity, Bluetooth as well. But if you are using these terms, there is something attached to that. There's a licensing agreement. So don't forget about that.
Even the
So if
USB,
you're having
USB, you should have USB.
USB, HDMI also, like here's this thing has a DVI connector on it. It also says DVI. That's not an HDMI connector. It doesn't output HDMI. It outputs DVI that's by coincidence on the same connector. That makes a difference. It's again, we're again in the tiny details that matter. Yeah, so that's example number two. Don't forget about these things. Are you actually allowed to call something a Bluetooth
Mm-hmm.
connected thing? Just because Espressif has licensed their modules to be called Bluetooth connected, does that mean if I use their module, I can also call mine Bluetooth?
I don't know. Does
No,
it? No.
no. The thing is, if I would resell their modules just as a normal reseller, then I can, because these registrations apply to that specific product. If I sell these Wi-Fi modules as these Wi-Fi modules again to someone else, everything is fine. If I integrate that into my product and I call it Bluetooth connected and I use that protocol and stuff, then I also have to register with BQB. Same goes for Wi-Fi. So yeah, details. Okay, the next example is we have a long-range Wi-Fi door alarm. I tried to build one of these once. I used a module called DA16200 by Dialog because it was advertised as having quite a long range with its PCB antenna. But I actually used it because it can be woken up via UDP. It's a very special module. Also, video about that. But the thing is, your product requirements matter for the selection of the specific module, and if you even have a module. We first had space constraints. Now we're using this Wi-Fi system maybe in a way it's not intended for,
Mm-hmm.
long-range communication. We're now going to the edge of what can be transmitted. Maybe we're using a very high frequency of transmission messages. Uh, we're trying to transport a lot of data.
Maybe different antenna.
Yeah, maybe we're trying to transport very little data, but over very long range. Maybe we try to use higher output power where we get into the borders of what is allowed. Also, depending on your region, different bands of specific frequency are reserved for different purposes. One common example is you can buy 5.8 gigahertz modules for FPV goggles, and you can get them everywhere. They can be freely sold, but if you actually use them, you have to restrict them to specific channels, depending on your region. And sometimes you can't, you actually have to like open the module and do a little more to make sure that they don't hop uh, to another frequency. And you have to think about these things. So if you're going on the edge of what these modules are meant to be, you likely won't be better served with your own custom solution. Or you might need to restrict yourself to whatever these modules can provide. But if you're going to the extremes of what they're capable of, and if you're running special firmware, if you're trying to have higher output power using different antennas, then your module pre-certification is not of concern anymore. So you have changed something, and changing the antenna for longer range communication is certainly something that is not allowed with most modules.
Yeah, I understand this. Dancing robot.
Yeah, dancing robot is very popular example. Uh, I myself and a lot of other people don't use ESP modules as Wi-Fi modules. We use it as general microcontroller because they cost not that much and they are very powerful and capable. I don't care for the Wi-Fi functionality. I just need a microcontroller with a lot of GPIO. And I personally always use them whenever I want to reprogram something quickly over USB and I don't want to have a chip in between. So I use an S2 or an S3. They have native USB, very easy to interface, two resistors, a plug. That's it. So I won't use it as an actual Wi-Fi module, which means I'm running custom firmware. I'm not using the RF part. Now, do I still need the RF certification? Because there's an RF module in my product. I have a little dancing robot, runs on ESP32. Let's say the PCB antenna is in there.
Now you got me. I never thought about this.
Yeah. Okay. Let's start from the other way. We have a dancing robot. There's an ESP32 in there. The one with a module with the IPEX antenna. Uh, Only the IPEX connector. There's no antenna connected. Do I still need to
Probably not.
certify for
No,
RED?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That's the thing. How do you know? It you can see it from two ways. The one way is what is physically in that product. So we have a dancing robot. Oh yeah, I didn't mention it's a kit. That's another. Okay, let's assume it's just a dancing robot. It's ready-made. It's built as is. Okay. I'm using this here as a stand-in. So now this little guy is my robot. Here's the ESP module that is inside the robot. I can see it from the outside. The thing dances on its own. I use this module just to run the robot's normal function. It doesn't connect to a Wi-Fi network. It is not accepting any Wi-Fi signals for controls or whatever. It's only using that as a microcontroller. There is no antenna on this thing. In this case, there is no Wi-Fi. We're not going to the RED directive. I can use a microcontroller that is made as a Wi-Fi module as a microcontroller. But I have to make sure that it's really only used as that. If there is no antenna connected, if the RF part is deactivated in software, there is nothing emitting. Sometimes we have to be really careful because some modules try to connect or look for services or whatever on boot, and then they go into their actual program that they have. So usually you use a spectrum analyzer and see if there is a spike somewhere periodically in that spectrum. That's usually a device trying to find other devices. Recently had that when checking a device, and we were expecting it not to do anything, but turns out the Linux kernel asks its Wi-Fi modules to look for random networks once in a while. So we had to physically remove that module to make sure that it's not actually active, or alter the kernel, basically, but it didn't want to do that. So if I can make sure that there is no activity, then this is just a normal microcontroller. Now I can use that module. Why would I use a module now, even though I don't use it for Wi-Fi? EMC compliance. These modules have been tested for EMC when they were brought to market. It's not a guarantee, but it's highly likely that they are not the problematic part in my design. These are the parts that have the highest frequency components in such a toy robot usually. They have the flash integrated. It's just easier for me to use that. And they cost a few bucks.
Yeah, that's what I was
Will
thinking
not
about.
be able to make it any smaller or any cheaper myself. It's a viable option to use it that way. The uh, the main thing is I have to make sure that it can't just on some random occasion just activate its Wi-Fi functionality and just start radiating. That's the most important thing. And even if the module has its PCB antenna attached and it's inside, still the same thing applies. It
Oh,
can have
okay.
an antenna. There's no problem with it physically having an antenna. The problem is if it is a radiator and if the user is able in its normal use, be it intended or unintended, especially intended, but also unintended and foreseeable use, uh, can't activate it by accident.
Mm-hmm.
So if there is an option in a menu and I press the arms of the robots and there's like a developer menu still in there, and if I press both at once, it activates Wi-Fi, that would be bad. So if I want to say this thing uses a Wi-Fi module as a microcontroller, but I don't have to certify for all these wireless things, then I really, really have to make sure that it's not activatable. And if this is an educational dancing robot that teaches you about programming microcontrollers and it has a Wi-Fi module in there, but the firmware where it gets shipped out just does a blink, like the blink sketch on an Arduino when you first plug it in, which is basically just to test if the microcontroller is running. And you have a similar thing on there, but the intended use is now that somebody writes specific code for that and uses all the crazy functionality of that little dancing robot. They might be able to activate uh, the wireless functionality. And now you should really test for wireless.
Mm-hmm. I understand.
Yeah,
I understand. We need to
that's
move.
one of
We need to move to the next one.
yeah. So yeah, and then we have the thing I wrote here. It's a kit, and that changes a lot of things.
Yeah.
A lot of people think if you supply stuff as a kit, everything gets easier. People build it on their own, blah, 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 blah. It can be easier under some jurisdictions. I can tell you under CE and in the EU, that doesn't make it easier. It makes it harder because now when somebody builds the kit to your specifications that you provide in the manual, they have to yield a compliant product.
Mm-hmm.
So if they do it exactly as they're told, it has to be according to those rules, which means that your manual has to be a lot better than it usually has to be. So that's one thing that's changed. There's a lot to talk about with kits, but in this case, yes, you can use such a module just as a microcontroller, but you have to be really sure about how it's used. And in doubt, do the measurements, do the full certification. Okay, so basically here's an overview so people.
This is the main point.
These are the main points. Yeah. So first is the answer to all of your question is it depends.
Yeah.
Do
I have my T-shirt? No, I don't have my It Depends T-shirt.
I really need to make T-shirts where it says it depends on there. But the thing is, your product is unique, basically. Don't look at other stuff, how they did it. Look at what you are building and then go through it step by step and decide. And if you get stuck, then get help. And never forget that it's not just this tiny little thing, it's just EMC and whatever. There's always a connection with the outside world. There's a context with the environment, where it's used, how it's used, who is the user, what are they doing with it. That changes a lot. So if you're unsure about that, just get help. Do not apply general hearsay stuff. If you find something on the internet and it sounds too good to be true, like, oh, these type of products are exempt from these rules. They may be, they may not. Be critical with that. Maybe the information you found is outdated. A lot of these regulations change regularly. And just from the date, like the EMC directive is from 2014, but it didn't come into effect 2014. They signed it, they ratified it, and then it has a specific date where it's in effect. There's a new machinery directive, for example. Everybody talks about the 2024 machinery directive, but it applies to machines that are put onto the market 2027. So there's still this gap. I would now certify to the new regulation just because it makes sense and for some specifics in that. But these dates don't have to line up that well. And a lot of times, like I regularly like see what AI stuff brings up if you ask for specific things, and it quotes very often outdated information just because it's so much about an older regulation on the internet. It appears more relevant to the topic, and then it will be more likely included. And that's wrong.
Yeah,
On very new stuff, you will not find that much information. It is not ingested into the models, but it is current. It's the actual right information that you're looking for. So be critical with stuff that you find. In doubt, just take a step back, maybe ask an expert, but look at your decisions from a different perspective. Just don't get honed in on this little thing. Look at the whole thing, and then you may, maybe using Bluetooth for this application is not the right thing. Maybe LoRaWAN is better. You don't know. Yeah. So, and one thing that I want everybody to know, it does not have to be scary or expensive. You can do like a lot of all this stuff yourself if you put in the work, or you can just decide to try it, and if you get stuck, get help, or then outsource it. Like for example, risk analysis is something that I would really tell people to try first themselves, and if they get stuck, get help, or outsource it for more complicated products, but at least try it first because it tells you a lot about your product. And try it early on. That is something that I would do like really early on. Okay, yeah. I've talked about you can get help. Who can help you? So there are specialized consultants. One of them is me. Here on the bottom, you can see my CE product coordinator certification number. You can look that up at the certification body Wifi that certified me. If you enter that number, you find me and find that it's valid until 2027, and I have to get courses and stuff and whatever to keep that valid, so my knowledge is up to date, which I think is a good system. You're not required to have this kind of certification to do the self-certification. This gets often misunderstood. This is for people who are consultants. This and for if you want to be the chief compliance officer in a bigger company, usually they also have to get these.
So if someone is trying to find someone else to consult,
Yeah.
can they? Is this number a kind of insurance that the person will know what?
No, this one is specifically, this is very regional, basically. This is specifically for my part of Austria. So other countries have different systems, but usually they have something like that. Yeah, some form of qualification that you can look up for people. There are usually specialized consultants, like bigger companies out there. Very often they want to have like the overall engineering project. So they are often together with big company consulting firms. They do all as a package. Sometimes they are very specialized, like somebody only does big machinery. That's the most common type. Only medical devices, only defense, only this and that. There are some that are very specialized in, I do only EMC stuff. Yeah. And you might find it's a bit hard to find somebody who does like general electronics products and not just this very specific part. I found my niche in, I do the everything that has electronics or not for the small business stuff and no packages and whatever. It's basically my niche. But if you ask your local authorities, and especially your equivalent of the Chamber of Commerce, that is called differently in every country. So basically the local authority that deals with businesses and their needs and whatever. And usually there's some branch of the government that supports businesses. They very often have specialty staff that deals with regulation and certification stuff. You can just ask them, and they usually can refer you to your next local consultant. That is basically what my local government, like there are listed consultants. I'm one of them, and if they find somebody in my area or a product that is within the realm of stuff that I do, they refer them to me. They can freely choose which one they want, but usually local authorities have a list or something of people they trust and they think that are qualified to do that sort of work. And
Yeah.
may be able to get financial assistance for that. In a lot of countries, you can get subsidies for this, at least for like, I need help with the risk analysis. I need the assessment which rules apply. For example, where I am, you can get that fully refunded for your initial assessment, which is really great. And ask your local your local authorities for that. There's a big chance there's some sort of assistance that you can get. So
I
it doesn't have
didn't
to
know
be
this.
expensive. Yeah, and yeah, if you specifically want to know more, there is this link here that tells you about the CE process in general. It's just a European site that is really good. You have a lot of stuff to click through. It's quite a long read, but it's pretty detailed. I haven't sadly found an equivalent for the FCC side or for the American side. Yeah, sadly. But that's a really good one. If you want to connect with me, that's smander.com. We also have a Discord where people basically they don't directly ask questions, but they basically give each other a heads up and share what they're currently working on. And we share news like regulatory news and whatever is going out there. And for this specific stuff with modules, the idea for that video was prompted by somebody on the Discord who asked, hey, do you know about these modules? Can I just use them and be happy? Or is there something I have to take care
I
about?
had same question.
Yeah. One last thing was we have a few things that are specifically for open source hardware, like Simple Start and Get Smander. These are, you can read about that on the homepage if you want. And there's the EU rep. We have touched on that in the document by Raspberry Pi, they have, just see if I can still, yeah, here it is. They have named a representative within the EU. If you are a EU company, you have to name yourself as this representative. You could name someone else that is qualified for that, like everybody who is within the EU. That is the qualification. They have to be a citizen. You might rather want to name somebody who actually knows their stuff because they have to communicate with the authorities on your behalf. If somebody's wrong with your product, if they need documents and whatever. But you now have to name somebody. So specifically for the American audience, if you want to sell to Europe, you need to have somebody. If you're a big company, then usually you have a subsidiary, like Raspberry Pi is from the UK. The UK is now not in the EU anymore, so they have a subsidiary in Ireland who deals with that, which is within the EU. But if you don't, then you can name somebody like a consultant, like me, for example, I offer that. But also, usually the distributors, if somebody's the exclusive importer for your product, they also might want to or representative. That usually comes with some caveats, like only sell through us and stuff like that. But that is also a possibility. Don't forget that, because if you don't have that, your stuff might get stuck at the border. So this is the last thing that I want to leave you with.
We still have like maybe 4 minutes, so I'm going to use them. Last question. So how does it normally work? Like, let's say someone is now thinking like, oh, I may need help. So it's going to cost me 10,000 euros, or I can just buy, I don't know, 5 hours of consulting and start with this, or how does it work?
Oh yeah. So usually, yes, you would go like to a consultant, and yeah, the 5,000, 10,000 euros is not a bad number. Usually they have a lot of overhead. They have to get a lot of stuff managed, so there is some initial cost involved. What I do is I do a different approach because I focus on makers, small businesses, people who bring products the first time, and especially open source hardware. So what we have here under services, you find a thing called Simple Start. If your product is open source, then this applies to you. Basically, it costs 349 euros. That's without tax, because tax is different in each country. But that is basically, we look at all your look at all the data from a product. So you basically upload your files, and then we make an initial assessment on which rules apply. How do you have to test it? What are the next steps that you do? So do I even have to CE certify it? Which regulations apply? Any red flags, stuff that I should care about? And yeah, this is about the 10th of what you usually get charged.
And if it's commercial
And
product, where it starts?
oh yeah, it's basically it doesn't matter if it's a commercial product or whatever. This is restricted to open source
No, I mean,
ones.
if it's not open source, that's what I meant. So
Oh, if it's
where
not
it
open source,
starts.
then there's a different thing, because I also offer consultation. Like usually, Simple Start takes me about like 10 hours or so, but I only charge you free basically, because an initial normal consultation hour costs 110,
That's for 1
and
hour, or what is it?
that is a full hour. But I usually do it that way. You basically book the hour, write me an email, or in the application form you write in what's your topic, what do you want to know about. Then I can already like pull up documents, get prepared for that, research, because people will often have very specific questions where you have to do some research. If you're asking that in the call, then yeah, I'm now doing half an hour research and you are looking at me. So I'm usually preparing for that, so you can get the most out of the hour. You can also, like some people write up 6 or 7 questions that they have, send me that by email, and we go like rapid through all these questions within the hour, so get the most value out of it. Open to everybody. Usually, the most consultants don't offer this because it's like overhead and whatever. I do, so you can get that hourly. You can also use this to for example, a document check is something that people like to use it for. They send me their documents that they already have, I look at them and then we go through them in a consultation session. Usually they book like 2 or 3 of these. And then, because it will take a bit longer to go through every single thing, and then you know, okay, these are already in order. You need to redo these ones. Here's something that's missing. These are your next steps that you need to take. And also, like for general stuff, like you did the risk analysis yourself, and now let's go through it and see if there's something missing or if something is off. That
Perfect.
usually,
You answered my question. Perfect. I didn't expect specific prices, but you included, so that's perfect. Okay.
oh yeah,
Okay. I didn't want to go through 2 hours, so but this was so interesting. I had to ask so many questions. Thank you
oh
so
yeah.
much,
I'm very
Clemens.
glad you did.
So
If you still have questions or people that watch this still have questions, and usually they do, uh, then yeah, leave them in the comments. We won't be able to like answer all specifics because it depends. But you may inspire for more videos
yeah,
that you can do on these topics, or yeah, go to the website. And if you need specific help, then we're here for you. You're
uh,
not alone. That's the most thing, and it doesn't have to be scary.
thank you so much, Clemens, for helping me with this video. This was really great interview. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all for this video. I hope it was helpful. If you would like to learn more about electronics and board design, check out our online courses. You will find everything important there, from basic board design up to advanced board design and high-speed PCB layout. We have courses in Altium, Cadence, KeyCAD, and also courses covering many different topics, for example, FPGA, EMC measurements, and so on. Visit our website at fedevel.com. That's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to leave your comments. See you in the next video. Bye.